What just went down inside Windsor Castle is the kind of moment royal watchers have been waiting decades to see unfold. After years of holding it all in, Prince William finally made a move that hit like a shockwave through the palace walls. He went straight into storage, pulled out Princess Diana's official portrait, and placed it exactly where many believe it always should have been, right beside Queen Elizabeth II on the Hall of Matriarchs wall. No warning, no heads up, nothing. And when Queen Camilla saw it, she was completely blindsided. Reports say she rushed to King Charles III and demanded it be taken down immediately. But what happened next didn't calm things down. It lit a fire that flipped the entire palace upside down. There's a portrait of Diana that most people have never even seen up close, and where it's been hidden for over 25 years. It's enough to make anyone pause. The painting was created during one of the brightest chapters of Diana's life, when her presence lit up every room, when her warmth reached people no royal had ever connected with before. Witnesses say when she first saw the finished portrait, she stood there in silence, just taking it in, like it captured something real, something deeply personal. That portrait was meant for something huge. It was supposed to hang in the Hall of Matriarchs inside Windsor Castle, a space reserved for the most important women in royal history. This isn't just any hallway. This is legacy, honor, recognition. But Diana never got to see it there, because before it could happen, everything changed. After her death in 1997, the portrait didn't get placed. It disappeared, quietly removed, wrapped up and locked away in storage where it sat in darkness for more than 2 decades. While the world was mourning loudly in the streets, something very different was happening behind palace doors. Something far colder. Insiders say that within hours of Diana's passing, the first conversations weren't about grief. They were about property. Questions were raised about jewelry, possessions, and control. Before the public had even processed the loss, there was already a scramble happening behind the scenes. And right in the middle of it, Camilla was moving. For years, she had been the hidden figure in the background, the one tied to Charles during his marriage to Diana. Diana herself once referred to her privately as the Rottweiler, fully aware of the role she played in breaking her marriage apart. Now, with Diana gone, everything shifted. Camilla didn't just step into the space, she took control of it. Diana had filled the palace with fresh flowers, carefully chosen, always present. Camilla had them removed, and not just replaced, burned. That alone tells you everything about the energy shift inside those walls. Then came the bedroom, the same room where Diana had spent countless nights, where she held her sons, where she faced her most private struggles. Camilla didn't want it, but she made sure no one else would have it either. The room was locked permanently, sealed off like it was something that needed to be erased. Diana's personal belongings were boxed up and moved out. Her presence began disappearing from the most visible spaces in royal residences, and that Hall of Matriarchs, the very place her portrait was meant to go, remained without her for over 20 years. One of the most loved royal figures of modern times, completely missing from her own family's wall. Meanwhile, William carried all of this silently. At just 15, he walked behind his mother's coffin in front of the entire world, face still, emotions locked down. But behind that calm exterior was a storm building up. He already knew about his father's relationship with Camilla, because Diana had told him herself. She explained everything, that there were 3 people in the marriage, that the family had broken apart because of it. Prince Harry learned in a completely different way. Sitting beside Diana, watching a TV debate, he saw Camilla's name appear on screen and simply asked who she was. Diana had to explain it right there, in real time, no preparation. Just truth hitting all at once. But the most unsettling part came later, from a letter. In 1995, Diana wrote a note to her solicitor, Victor Mishcon, expressing fears about her safety. She claimed she believed Charles was planning a staged accident involving brake failure and a serious head injury. She even wrote that Camilla was nothing but a decoy and being used in the situation. 2 years later, Diana died in a car crash in Paris. That letter didn't immediately spark action. It sat for years before reaching investigators. Charles was later questioned privately, but William and Harry didn't know the full details for a long time. When William finally understood what his mother had written, and then looked around at how her memory had been treated inside the palace, something inside him changed for good. It didn't fade. It didn't soften. It locked in. He watched Camilla move through the same rooms Diana once lived in. He saw portraits of his mother disappear. He saw the Hall of Matriarchs stand without her presence. Outwardly, he stayed composed, but inside, the anger was building nonstop. At 16, it finally spilled out. He confided in someone close, saying Camilla had got her claws into his father and never let go. He believed his mother had been pushed out, stripped of protection, left isolated. He saw it as a chain of events that led to her being alone in a Paris tunnel that night. Those are heavy words for a teenager, but he carried them for decades, and he wasn't the only one holding on to something deep. Princess Anne had her own history tied to this situation, one that started long before Diana even entered the picture. Before Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles, he was actually in a serious relationship with Princess Anne. It wasn't casual. They were close enough that marriage was being talked about. But the royal family stepped in and shut it down because of religious differences, with Andrew being Catholic and Anne tied closely to the Church of England. That decision changed everything. And the ripple effects? They didn't just fade away. They carried on through years of tension, broken ties, and unresolved history that would later collide in ways no one could ignore. Princess Anne was never allowed to marry the man she truly loved, and it wasn't by choice. She stepped aside because the system demanded it, and almost immediately after that door closed, Queen Camilla stepped right in, and Andrew Parker Bowles proposed to her. In 1973, Anne sat there at their wedding, watching everything unfold from the pews, seeing the man she was once expected to marry now standing beside someone else, and that moment didn't just fade away, it stayed with her for decades. That same woman would later become one of the most controversial figures in royal history, tied to King Charles III during his marriage to Princess Diana, connected to the breakdown of that relationship, and eventually walking into Buckingham Palace wearing a crown. According to royal author Penny Junor, Camilla was deeply unsettled around Anne for years, not just uncomfortable but genuinely intimidated, as Anne's cold and distant attitude reportedly made things tense every time they were in the same room, and whatever issues existed between them were never resolved, not even once. After the 2023 coronation, that tension reportedly came to the surface in a way that couldn't be ignored. At a private luncheon, Anne is said to have looked Camilla directly in the eye and told her, "You are not the queen, you are just the king's wife," delivering it without hesitation or softness, just a blunt statement that left no room for interpretation. Reports also suggest Anne never bowed to Camilla at all, and that she personally asked Queen Elizabeth II for permission to be exempt from that tradition, which was granted, making it clear where she stood on the matter. Anne had watched everything over the years, from Diana being pushed aside to her presence slowly disappearing from key royal spaces, and she saw the Hall of Matriarchs remain incomplete for over 20 years, with a space that should have honored Diana left empty, and she carried that reality quietly the entire time. Both Anne and Prince William shared the same goal, which was to finally place Diana where she belonged, not hidden or erased, but recognized and respected within the very walls that once excluded her. William didn't rush into this decision, as he spent years planning it with careful precision, holding private meetings with curators, studying royal protocol in detail, and going through historical records to make sure every step followed the rules perfectly so that once it was done, it couldn't be undone by anyone. This wasn't emotional or impulsive, it was calculated, like a long game that had been building for over 2 decades, and this was the moment everything came together. The night before it happened, William called Anne, and the conversation was short but meaningful, as both of them understood exactly what was about to take place. "I cannot wait to see the look on her face. It is long overdue. Diana deserves to come home," William said, and Anne replied, "She comes home tomorrow," with William simply responding, "Yes," before the call ended, leaving no need for anything else to be said. At that same time, Camilla had absolutely no idea what was coming, as she had spent years believing the situation had already been settled. But on that specific day, William's team made sure she had an engagement outside London, a move that was clearly intentional to keep her away until everything was completed and irreversible. Back at Windsor Castle, the Hall of Matriarchs was closed off, with only a small group of carefully selected staff allowed inside, all of whom understood the importance of what they were about to do. There was no announcement, no press coverage, and nothing recorded in the royal diary, as everything was carried out in complete silence. As evening approached, Diana's portrait was brought into the hall after sitting in storage for more than 2 decades, and those handling it did so with visible care, moving slowly and deliberately as if they understood the weight of what they were holding. Anne was present in the room herself and insisted on overseeing the entire process, as this was not something she was willing to leave to anyone else after waiting so long. The protective covering was removed gradually, and for the first time in over 20 years, Diana's portrait was fully visible again inside the walls where it was always meant to be. The positioning was checked, measurements confirmed, and within 90 minutes, the portrait was placed on the wall. It was positioned beside Queen Elizabeth II, placing 2 very different but equally significant women side by side, one who ruled for decades and one who never had the opportunity, yet both connected in a way that made the placement feel long overdue. The room fell completely silent after it was done, as those present simply stood there, taking in what they were witnessing. After a moment, Anne quietly said, "Diana belongs here." She always did, speaking in a calm tone but with meaning that carried through the room, finally putting into words what had been left unspoken for years. Diana had been one of the most admired figures of her time, drawing massive crowds, connecting with people across the world, and leaving a lasting impact that few others ever have. Yet her own image had been kept out of a space that represented honor and legacy. That same night, Camilla returned from her engagement and went to sleep without knowing anything had changed, unaware that the Hall of Matriarchs now held a presence she had long believed would remain absent. For years, she had reshaped the environment around her. But this moment shifted something permanently, even before she realized it. The next morning, Camilla arrived expecting a normal day, but as soon as she heard what had happened, her reaction was immediate and intense, as she reportedly froze before becoming visibly furious, demanding that the portrait be removed right away, calling for an emergency meeting with William, pushing Charles to intervene, and insisting on answers from everyone involved in the decision. But this time, none of it worked, as every demand she made was refused, one after another, marking a rare moment where her influence didn't change the outcome, and the decision stood exactly as it had been carried out. For the first time in her entire royal life, Queen Camilla found herself completely powerless inside her own home. The woman who had spent over 2 decades quietly reshaping palace life around her suddenly realized something she never expected, that everything could be reversed and she had no control to stop it. But the rejected demands weren't even the worst part of that morning. Not even close. The real moment hit when she turned to King Charles III. This was the man who had spent years standing by her side, pushing against pressure from the public, the press, the institution, even his own sons, all to make space for her. For 25 years, he had been her constant support, the one person she believed would always step in when things went wrong. And now she stood there, expecting him to fix it, expecting him to act. But he didn't. He looked at her and said nothing. No calls, no objections, no attempt to reverse anything. He allowed Prince William's decision to stand, and he let Princess Anne's role go completely unchallenged. Just like that, he accepted it. And in that moment, everything shifted. Palace insiders suggest that was when Camilla truly understood something she had never been forced to face before. That Charles had made a choice. Not just as a husband, but as a king. He chose the institution. He chose his son. And in a way, he chose to finally acknowledge the place of Princess Diana. That silence carried weight. This is a man who, according to reports, had privately asked William not to push Camilla aside in the future, fully aware of the tension that had existed for years. Sources close to the family have said clearly that William still carries deep, unresolved anger over what happened to his mother, and while Prince Harry has spoken openly, William has kept his feelings controlled and internal. Charles knew all of this. He always had. But when the moment finally arrived, he didn't step in. That wasn't just hesitation. That was acceptance. It was the recognition that something long building had finally reached its turning point, and there was no stopping it anymore. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get more intense, Anne walked into the room herself. No message, no posrednik, just direct presence. She stood face to face with Camilla, the woman tied to years of tension, and calmly said 5 words. "It is what Diana deserved." Nothing more, nothing less. Those words landed hard. Coming from Anne, someone Camilla had never been able to influence, never been able to shake, it carried a kind of finality that couldn't be ignored. This wasn't just a comment. It felt like a closing statement on years of silence. What followed wasn't just a difficult morning. It marked the start of a visible shift. Camilla was quietly pulled back from certain upcoming engagements, and changes began happening across the institution. Charitable work once closely associated with Diana started gaining attention again, now appearing more often in the schedules of Catherine, Princess of Wales, and William. Within weeks, Diana's name appeared more frequently in official palace communications than it had in years. It wasn't subtle, it was noticeable, consistent, and structured in a way that signaled a broader change. The message was clear: something had shifted, and it wasn't temporary. William had carried his feelings for years, but unlike his brother, he didn't express them publicly. While Harry addressed everything openly, even writing about it in his memoir Spare, William chose a different approach. He stayed patient, focused, and waited until he had the position to act through the system itself. That patience became his strategy. Instead of reacting, he prepared. Instead of speaking out, he positioned himself. And when the moment came, he didn't hesitate. He acted in a way that couldn't easily be undone. Reports suggest Charles has been aware of this dynamic for a long time and has even privately expressed concern about what might happen in the future. Because once William becomes king, the structure around Camilla's role could be reassessed entirely, not emotionally, but institutionally. At the same time, Diana's legacy has been moving back into focus. The causes she supported, the charities she built through genuine commitment, are being brought forward again, now connected to the current generation of the royal family. Her name is being spoken with renewed visibility and respect, something that hadn't been seen at this level for years. Inside Windsor Castle, the Hall of Matriarchs now tells a different story. Diana's portrait stands beside Queen Elizabeth II, placing two defining figures of modern royal history together in the space that represents legacy and recognition. William was only 15 when he walked behind his mother's coffin through the streets of London, a moment the entire world watched. That day stayed with him. And over the years, instead of reacting impulsively, he built something step by step, carefully aligning every move so that when the time came, it would stand firm. When everything was ready, he worked with Anne, the one person who carried both personal understanding and institutional authority to support it. And then, quietly, without announcement or spectacle, the change happened. One evening, while Camilla was away and unaware, William brought his mother back into the space she had always been meant to be in. No noise, no public statement, just action. Now, Diana's portrait is there, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. What happened inside Windsor Castle wasn't just about a portrait going up on a wall. It was about something much deeper finally being set straight. For decades, Princess Diana's place in royal history had felt complicated, carefully managed, and at times quietly pushed aside. But that moment changed the tone completely. Because this wasn't emotional chaos or a sudden reaction. This was calculated, intentional, and impossible to ignore. Prince William didn't act out of impulse, he acted with precision, making sure every rule, every tradition, and every protocol backed him up so that once it was done, it would stand firm without question. That's what made it so powerful. And what made it even more significant was the silence that followed. No public pushback, no dramatic reversal, no official attempt to undo it. Even King Charles III, who had spent years navigating the most difficult balancing act between past and present, chose not to interfere. That silence spoke louder than anything else that could have been said. For many watching from the outside, it felt like something long overdue had finally happened. Diana wasn't just remembered, she was restored to a place of recognition inside the very institution that once struggled to define her role. And that shift didn't happen loudly. It happened quietly, but with lasting impact. There's also something important about how it was done. It wasn't framed as conflict, it wasn't announced as a statement. It simply became reality. One day the wall didn't include her, and the next day it did. That kind of change carries weight because it doesn't ask for approval. It just exists. At the same time, it reflects something about William's approach that has become more visible over the years. Where others might react publicly, he moves differently, more controlled, more deliberate, and focused on outcomes rather than reactions. That approach may not always be loud, but moments like this show how effective it can be. It also highlights how the royal family itself continues to evolve. The balance between tradition and change has always been delicate, and moments like this show how that balance can shift without breaking the structure entirely. It's not about rewriting history, it's about deciding how that history is represented moving forward. And Diana's story has always carried a unique place within that history. Her connection with people, her ability to bring attention to causes, and the way she changed expectations around public life left a lasting mark that hasn't faded over time. That's why her presence still resonates, even decades later. Now, with her portrait standing beside Queen Elizabeth II, it creates a powerful visual. Two figures who shaped the emotional connection between the monarchy and the public in very different ways, now placed side by side in a space meant to honor that impact. For those inside the institution, it represents acknowledgement. For those outside, it feels like recognition. And for William, it may simply represent something personal finally being resolved in a way that aligns with both duty and memory. What makes this moment stand out isn't just what changed. It's how long it took to happen. Years of waiting, years of careful positioning, and years of understanding how to move within a system that doesn't change easily. That kind of patience doesn't always get noticed, but when it leads to something like this, it becomes clear why it mattered. And now that it's done, it sets a tone for what comes next. Not in a dramatic or disruptive way, but in a steady, controlled shift that suggests how future decisions might be handled. Quietly, strategically, and with long-term impact in mind. Because in the end, this wasn't just about correcting the past, it was about shaping how the future remembers it. Diana's portrait is no longer hidden, no longer waiting, and no longer absent from a space where many believed she always belonged. It's there now, part of the story, part of the legacy, and part of how history will continue to be seen. And that's what makes this moment feel so significant. Not because it was loud, but because it was final.